Cardano is not unlike a battleship that's been painstakingly built piece by piece, compartment by compartment on dry land for years. On the 12th, we launch, and we'll be the biggest, fastest, baddest ship on the high seas with the most cannons, and we'll be able to travel wherever we want. Ready? Let's go. One of the most remarkable things about Cardano is that it was built with this intense abundance mentality. It was like, hey, should we build a pad so that we can land helicopters on top of the ship? Yes. Should we also take the time to make it so you can land jet aircraft on the ship? Yes. Should we build a secret hatch in the bottom of the ship so that we can dock submarines inside the ship? Yes. I think this watching this ecosystem get built out and all of the many varied things they took the time to think about and build into, at least build a capacity for inside the ecosystem, inside the protocol. It's something I think you only get when you have a crazy billionaire at the helm who has that intense abundance mentality, who didn't care at all about the quick buck and was only playing the long game. One of the many advantages of building the biggest, baddest, most innovative ship on the seas is that all the most adventurous, innovative people want to be on that ship. And a great example of that has been how projects within the Cardano ecosystem have come out of the woodwork lately, explaining how they've already figured out how they're going to do their concurrency management. At this point, we've got at least 5 different projects that say they've already solved concurrency, when only a few days ago, Ethereum maximalists, and let's face it, maximalists of a lot of projects, were trying to tell the world that this was going to be fatal to Cardano. While concurrency management and extended unspent transaction output systems has been like some kind of a revelation for the Cardano critics over the last week or so, we talked about it on this channel over 2 months ago. And to be honest, a lot of smart Cardano projects have been working on it for a long time. In this post this morning, Smaugpool gave us a really good rundown of a bunch of different commentary about how concurrency is going to be managed. Ergo was able to tell us there's a natural workaround involving off-chain bots, and even gave us a link to their GitHub so that we could see exactly how that can be implemented. SundaeSwap wrote this article where they laid out a couple of different solutions and then told us that their actual solution was another one that they weren't describing yet. Maladex wrote this long thread, which basically said that concurrency management in UTXO wasn't even really a problem. It's just that design patterns had to be established, which would become the norm for everyone to use in a couple of years. And of course, Maladex was able to straight up tell us concurrency issue solved. As covered on this channel previously, Occam had already let us know by press release that they had found and implemented a novel and entirely decentralized solution to the concurrency challenge. Finally, we got this article from Hai and Dat over at Meld, who lay out in very detailed fashion exactly how they're planning to manage concurrency. I won't go through every single detail of this, but if you're interested, you can go over to Medium and read this whole article. It's very detailed. But it looks like a really interesting system involving both state UTXOs and reserve UTXOs, such that anytime a new state UTXO is created, multiple reserve UTXOs are created for multiple users to consume concurrently. Those reserve UTXOs are consumed to create batch steps, which are then deterministically applied to the state in one transaction. In short, it looks like we've got this, guys. Cardano built the best, most innovative, baddest battleship out on the seas, and it attracted the right kind of innovative and adventurous people who were able to come up with these kinds of great solutions to concurrency management. Granted, we don't really know at what stage of implementation all these projects will be at on the 12th, but man, it sure looks good so far. While that's all obviously great news, there's something else I think you should know about. It's not specific to Cardano, but I think it's revealing of something that I think could impact the entire crypto space, including Cardano. So this was a thread made by Brian Armstrong the other day. And he is basically complaining about the SEC in this thread, but it's pretty serious. Here's what happened. Coinbase wanted to launch this thing that I think they were going to call Coinbase Lend. This is going to look very familiar to anybody in crypto. You give them your USDC, which is a US dollar stablecoin, and they were going to pay you 4%. While Cardano people probably scoff at that, given what's happening in our staking network, a lot of people would probably be interested in this. As Brian says, it makes sense. If you want to lend out your funds, you can earn a return. Everyone seems happy. A bunch of great companies in crypto have been offering versions of this for years. Coinbase came out recently and said we would be launching our own version. Many of you will know about BlockFi's version of this type of product, but if you watch this channel, you'll also know that state securities regulators have been after BlockFi like crazy lately. Undoubtedly, Coinbase was monitoring that situation closely, and Brian says, we were planning to go live in a few weeks, so we reached out to the SEC to give them a friendly heads up and briefing. They responded by telling us this Lend feature is a security. And then Brian says they refused to tell us why they think it's a security and instead subpoenaed a bunch of records from us and demanded testimony from our employees, and then told us they will be suing us if we proceed to launch. Obviously, this did not fit with Brian's conception of how security law should work. He says, how can lending be a security? The chief legal officer of Coinbase, Paul Grewal, seems to be of the same mind. He wrote this article, which he titled, "The SEC has told us it wants to sue us over Lend. We don't know why." And he revealed that they've actually been engaging with the SEC about Lend for 6 months, and that the SEC even went as far as to ask for the name and contact information of every single person on the Lend waitlist. He says that Coinbase has not agreed to provide that because it's their customers' personal information, and they don't quite seem to see how it's relevant. Like Brian Armstrong, he also expresses dissatisfaction and frustration that, in his words, the SEC still won't explain why they see a problem. He says they've offered us the chance to submit a written defense of Lend, but that would be futile when we don't know the reasons behind the SEC's concerns. He kind of sums up what's probably the sentiment of a lot of people in the crypto industry when he says other crypto companies have had lending products on the market for years, and new lending products continue to launch as recently as last month. I didn't read all that to you because I think you'll find it entertaining to get into the minutia of Coinbase's regulatory quarrel with the SEC. But I think it does illustrate what's probably a huge gulf between crypto perception of DeFi and what's probably the regulator perception of DeFi. And I think this thread right here kind of explains it. This is apparently a Georgetown Law School professor, and he has a few things to say about the Coinbase Chief Legal Officer's article. When the Coinbase Chief Legal Officer basically says, formal guidance from the SEC would be a big help to regulating our industry in a responsible way. This professor says, no, there's absolutely nothing about Coinbase's Lend product that is crypto specific. It's just an old-fashioned investment contract. You give us your money to play around with now, and we'll promise to give you 4% APY later. I won't get into the Reeves case that they both reference here and what it says about these kinds of loan contracts. But this illustrates the exact difference between what the crypto industry thinks about DeFi and what regulators probably think about DeFi, and also how much the regulators kind of owe us an explanation of the law. The professor here says the SEC doesn't have the obligation or the resources to issue guidance about things that should be obvious to a baby securities lawyer. It's really astounding that Coinbase thinks it's entitled to anything more. It also shows that Coinbase doesn't understand the Wells process. So a Wells notice is what appears to be what Coinbase received. He says a Wells hearing is when Coinbase gets its chances to make its case to the SEC to explain why the SEC has it all wrong. Only if it fails to meet its burden will the SEC sue. You'll remember from the Coinbase article that the chief legal officer was saying that it sounded like it didn't make sense to Coinbase to even respond in writing to the Wells notice because they don't understand the rationale that it was based on. He says Coinbase seems to think that it's entitled to at least an extra round of formal process beyond the Wells process. That's not how it works. I'll just say this. Is there a securities lawyer on this flight? Because it sure looks like there isn't. Very aggressive. Coinbase seems to be seeking regulatory clarity on this issue that it thinks is like a new frontier for securities law. How would securities law apply to a crypto loan? And I think there are probably a lot of regulators out there that take an approach more like this law professor when he says there's absolutely nothing about this that's new. He's like, there's nothing that's even crypto specific. It's just an old-fashioned investment contract. You give us your money to play around with now, and we'll promise to give you 4% APY later. Crypto people are probably looking at this like, hey, I'm just making a loan to Coinbase, who I trust to pay me back, and they're going to pay me 4% interest. This is just like when I loan my neighbor $500. This is a loan. And that's not how this law professor is looking at this, and probably not how regulators are looking at it. All they see is you're sending your assets to a party, here Coinbase, and they're promising you a return, a yield on those assets you're sending them. To them, that's just an investment contract in the sense of that term as it's used in Howey, which we've covered before on this channel. That's a security to these regulators. They don't care if Coinbase calls it a loan to Coinbase or a fixed yield investment in Coinbase. All they see is that you're sending them assets and they're promising you a return on those assets. We won't get into the minutia of when that type of loan is sort of pursuant to a business deal, and it's the same as when you receive a loan to buy a car or a mortgage to buy a house, that kind of thing. But suffice it to say, this law professor is equating this exactly to a situation where you send your assets to anyone and they're promising you a yield on those assets. I think we're going to see this pattern repeatedly over the next couple of years. People in crypto are going to look at this and say, this is a loan. How can a loan be a security? And people like this professor and regulators are going to look at this and say, look, you sent some assets to a platform because that platform promised you a return on your assets. We don't care what they told you they're doing with the assets. We're going to call that a security. I think we're going to see this over and over again, and it's going to be really frustrating for the crypto community. But I hope it doesn't affect any of you out there listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow.